Hello, dear friends. I am writing to you. I am talking to you from Bucharest. It's quite cold here. It is February. It's about 2 degrees, high of 2 degrees today. And for Israel, that's cold, I guess, compared to Montreal, where I was born. That's not very cold for February. I'd like to talk about parashat beshalach based on some words that I said in the Jewish Community Center on Friday evening on Leil Shabbat. Parshat Beshalach, the crossing of the Red Sea. Shirat Hayam, the song on the Red Sea. And of course, the Red Sea probably should be the Sea of Reeds, because in Hebrew we say Yam Suf, the Sea of Reeds. Now, the Parsha opens up with God taking the Jewish people through the land of the Philistines, not taking them through the land of the Philistines towards the land of Israel, because that would be too close because God didn't want us to see a war. But at the end of the parasha, we do see a war with Amalek, which has to be explained too. But I'd like to jump right away to what I think is the motif of this week's parasha, this week's Sedra Pericopa. And God sort of hardens Pharaoh's heart and makes the Jews go in different ways in the desert to make it look like they don't know where they're going, so that Pharaoh should run after them. And he also says, what did we do? We let them go. Why should we do that? And the situation is such that Pharaoh is coming with his 600 chariots and all the chariots of Egypt. And he's running after the Israelites. And the Israelites look forward and they see the Sea of Reeds in front of them, which we call today the Red Sea for some reason. And the people panic and they turn to Moses and they say to Moses, Hamibli en kvarim b'Mitzrayim, are there not enough graves in Egypt that you took us to die in the desert? Why did you take us out of Egypt? This is what we said before. Stop. Let us work for the Egyptians. We'll be slaves for them. It's better to be a slave for Egypt than to die in the desert. And Moses said to the people, do not be afraid. You will see God's salvation, which he will do today, because now you see the Egyptians, you will never see them again. God will fight for you, and you shall be silent. Now, there's an interesting midrash in the Mechilta, and the midrash talks about four different types of reactions that the Israelites had to this situation. Because when you're in panic, what do? Some people can think rationally, and when there's panic, and some people cannot. So, what exactly you do in such a situation? So, the midrash says there were four reactions. Reaction number one, those who said, okay, it's all over, let's just jump in the sea and we'll die in the sea, meaning nothing to do, total despair, because a lot of people, that's the way they react in times of despair. Others said, no, we'll go back to Egypt. We'll negotiate with the Egyptians for our slavery again. At least we'll have our lives. Again, total despair. Then there was a third type of reaction. Let's just fight. No plan, but we'll fight and die. Also despair. And the fourth reaction, the Midrash says, they try to learn it from these verses that we just read, is let's just scream. We'll protest. No good. Protest to Moses, protest the Egypt, just scream and whatever. A little bit illogical. And all of these things show despair. And Moshe says to the people, God will fight for you. You'll never see the Egyptians again. You'll see it today. And you will be silent. Because this is what happened until now. And Moses' words, I'm sure, entered the people's hearts. However, God disagrees. And in verse 15, in chapter 14, God says to Moshe, why are you screaming to me? Meaning, why are you praying to me? When you pray hard, it's called screaming too in the Bible. Listen to tell the people of Israel, go forward. Just tell them to go forward. That's all you have to do. As it says, just tell them to go forward. So Moses said, you won't have to do anything. God will fight for you and you'll be silent. But God says to Moses, no, we're out of Egypt already. They have to learn how to go forward themselves. So the Talmud says, I think it's in Sota, that, okay, Moses says to the people, go forward. That's what God said. People are a little bit surprised. They look back, they look forward. Nobody wants to go. Each one of the tribes arguing with each other. Nobody wants to go forward. We're just going to walk into the water and what it's all about. And then Nachshon ben Aminadav, Aaron's brother-in-law, decides that if God said, let's go forward, we're going to go forward. So Nachshon walks into the water of the Sea of Reeds. And the water is going up to his waist. He just continues. God said forward, we go forward. Now the water is up to his chest. God said forward, we go forward. Now the water is up to his neck. God said forward, we go forward. And he's walking slowly forward. And the water is about to reach his nose. And God says to Moses, quickly. And this is verse 17. Verse 16. Lift up your staff, Moses, and spread your hand over towards the sea, and let it split, so that the people of Israel shall go forward. In other words, Nachshon made the move. Now it's time. Somebody made the move. And then Moses picks up his staff, and the sea splits, and the Israelites go through. We have a different concept here, which is happening. See, until now, the Israelites were passive. And God did everything, and Moses lifted the staff. But now the Jews are expected to move forward. You want to be a people? You have to learn to be a people. You have to learn to take responsibility. You must move forward. God will help you when you move forward. If you don't move forward, nothing will happen. God helps those who help themselves. So go as a people and move forward. Now, this idea is a novelty, and it's difficult for the people to understand it. It's an issue of believing in yourself. Believing that God will help you, but also believing yourself that you can actually do things. Until now, there were slaves, identity without identity, and Moses helped them get out of that. And God took them out of Egypt. But they still have this fear, and they don't know how to move forwards. The next thing that happens is they go through the sea. And at the sea splits, and they go through. And again, there's a mechilta, a midrash, that says something very surprising. Ra'ata shifcha layam ashara lo ra Yechezkel ben Buzi HaKohen. What the simplest Jew, and the Hebrew word for Jew is a slave, this female slave, but also they're all female and male slaves, the whole Jewish people, the whole Israelites. So the simplest female slave, meaning the simplest Jewess, was able to see things that Ezekiel, who chapter 1 of the book of Ezekiel is called the secrets of the chariot, where the heavens split open for him in the Babylonian exile in the land with the Chaldeans. And he starts seeing all these revelations and describing them. It's called one of the secrets of the Bible, according to the Talmud in chapter 2 of Chagiga. It says the simplest Israelites saw things on the Red Sea that even Ezekiel could not. And in the past, I've also drawn attention to this midrash because I find it puzzling. If it would have said the simplest Israelite saw things at Sinai, which Ezekiel didn't see, that I would understand, because Sinai was when God revealed himself to the whole people of Israel. So of course they would have seen things. It's the level of the prophecy of Moses, which is the highest level of prophecy. And they all saw it. All the nation saw the sounds, which is interesting to see sounds, and also the fires, and God's speaking to them. So that would have made more sense. But what does it mean at the Red Sea? Because at the Red Sea, or the Sea of Reeds, it wasn't the revelation. It was God saving them, but it wasn't exactly a revelation. Here I always explain the meaning to be like this. It's very unusual for a Jew, even for a believing Jew, any believing person who believes that God acts beyond and hides behind nature, like it says in Shir Hashirim, in the Song of Songs, that Mashkiach min hachalonot, mitzitz mi'acharakim, God supervises the world, governs the world, but looking through a window, and he peeks through the cracks. So God usually hides his face in order to enable human free will. But here God saved the Jewish people in a miraculous way. And this is something you don't normally see in life. To even see natural miracles is unusual. To see obvious miracles is a rarity in the history of the world. In Parshat Vayera, God says to Moses, I appeared to the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the name El Shaddai, but the name, the tetragrammaton, the name Havaya, I did not reveal to them. Nachmanides explains, because the name El Shaddai is the God of nature. And God appeared to the patriarchs and even helped them and did miracles for them, but within the laws of nature. So Abraham fought the four kings and won with only 318 men, but still he fought. And God helped him overcome these powerful kings. The angels told Abraham that Sarah would give birth. Sarah was 90. It's definitely a miracle, but she did give birth in a normal way in the end. So God did the miracles within the natural world. But with the splitting of the sea, what's happening here, this is not natural, that the sea stands up on two sides and the Israelites just pass through. So they were able to witness, bear testimony to God getting involved in the physical world. That's something usually people don't see, because God has to veil himself and hide from the physical world to allow free will. So this is very and even Ezekiel didn't see that, because Ezekiel lived in the Babylonian exile after the destruction of Jerusalem and after the destruction of the temple. So even Ezekiel didn't see the fulfillment of his own prophecies, where the Jews would be gathered again to the land of Israel and build the temple. But those Israelites at the sea, they saw things that even Ezekiel cannot see, how God can actually governs history, because he revealed it to them at that moment, something we do not see. At the most, we can look back into history and say these events were quite miraculous. And even now that we're living through miraculous events, as Israel had to fight on seven sides in this war, which is still not completely over. It's just a ceasefire at the moment. And we look back and we see some of the miracles that happened, but these are natural miracles. We have to look very closely and understand what could have happened and what did happen in order to understand. But at the Red Sea, it was different. Everybody said, Ze Eli Vanvehu, this is my God and I will praise him. Elohei Aviv Ramamenu, the God of my forefathers, and I will exalt him. But then after that, right after the story of the crossing of the Red Sea, the people complained. And they complain that they don't have water. Now, I have to say that very often we think, okay, these guys complain a lot. But if you look exactly at the story, right after the crossing of the Red Sea, it says on chapter 15, verse 23, they went 3 days in the desert without water. Okay? You have to understand, they didn't complain until the third day. Now going through the sea, okay, let's say they carried some water in canteens, possibly. So maybe the first day was okay. But by the third day, when you are in the desert, you don't have water. You're starting to feel it. I mean, they were really, the fact that they kept their mouths shut for 3 days means that they weren't as terrible as sometimes the verses makes it look. And they came to a place which was called Marah because the waters were bitter. And they said to Moses, what's going on? And God showed him a tree, and then the waters became sweet, and they received the law there. And then it continues again. And again, they are trying to figure out what's going on. How are we supposed to live like this? They said, what are we supposed to eat? And Moses says, don't worry, God will take care. He brought you into the desert. He'll find you something to eat. But again, they complain to Moses and Aaron. And they say, we used to have food. When we were in Egypt, we had something. But now we're going to die of starvation. God said to Moses, I'm going to bring them manna from the heavens, bread from the heavens, and they will pick it up. But when they pick it up, they're only allowed to take Omer la Gugolet, what every person needs for one day. They have to learn bitachon. They have to learn to trust me. They will only take what's sufficient for one day. And that's it. Because they have to learn faith. They seem to have a problem with that. To trust in me. Because they see I'm here. And even so, there were people who tried to take too much. And of course, it turned into worms in the morning. And when they saw this bread, they said, Manhu, what is it? Ki lo yadu mahu, because they didn't know what it was. And therefore it's called man or manna. Manhu, what is it? I had a rabbi once said that manhu, if you take the letters of manhu and put them together and switch them around a little bit, the letters manhu make up the word emunah, which is faith. Because the man was to teach us faith, to trust in God. Because that incubator, that laboratory, which was the 40 years in the desert, was to teach the people of Israel to trust in God. It was a difficult thing. They complained, but if you figure out how many times they complained in 40 years, it doesn't seem to be that many. And it was mostly in the first 2 years and the last year. And then after that, again, they are going through the Midbar Sin, the desert of Sin. And again, they don't have water. And again, they complain. You have to understand it's a big complaint where you don't have water in the desert because what do you do? And then finally, Moses hits the rock and the water comes out from the rock. But the Israelites are blamed because they were blamed for testing God and for asking the question, is God within our midst or not? And they should know the answer to that question already. And then Amalek shows up. At this point, after they were at Sinai originally, well, actually the beshalach is before Sinai, so we're actually before Sinai, so I have to change that. But no, so after beshalach, when they see after they've seen the plagues, after they saw them crossing in the Red Sea, after they saw that God gave them the manna and God gave them water first time and water a second time, God can do it again. So they do complain. And maybe from our point of view, the complaining might even be justified. But God expects a lot out of them because of what they've seen and what they know can happen and will happen. And they know that also Moses won't let them down. He will pray for them when necessary. So the fact that they were wondering, now, what does it mean, is God within our midst? It's not, they know that God exists. That's not the issue. They're just wondering, is he in our midst or did he leave us? For them, that's a problem. Because God expects them to know that he did not leave them. He has to hide his countenance, but he's there. And in that special, unique situation that they're in, they have to know that. There's a midrash that says, and Rashi brings it, this can be compared to a man who's walking with a young child, and he's watching over his child. Then at one point, he picks the child up and puts him on his shoulders so that because the child gets a little tired of walking. And as they're walking, somebody turns to the child and says, "Where's your father?" And the child says, "I don't know. I don't see him." Father says, "You don't see me?" Putting you back down again so you can see me. And then a dog comes and barks at the kid, and the father picks him up again. So the Midrash says the same thing. The people of Israel are testing, is God within our midst? God says, "You're not sure if I'm in our midst? Okay, here comes Amalek and is going to attack you." So, because the next verse, right at the end of this parasha, it says, "Vayavo Amalek," and Amalek came and attacked Israel in Rephidim. It's almost as if God is saying, "You're not sure if I'm in my midst? Okay, you have Amalek attack you, and you don't realize that I've been defending you the whole time." And Amalek attacks them. And Moses says to Joshua, "Okay, I want you to choose men from the ones who are army age and fight against Amalek." And he does. But only when Moses, who's sitting now on the mount, raises his arms, do they succeed to override and overcome Amalek. But when Moses puts down his arms, Amalek is succeeding in the war. And Moses is getting tired. So Aaron and Hur hold his arms. And it says, Vahi yadav emunah ad bor hashamesh. His hands are faithful until morning. Which means the faithfulness of the hands of Moses is the ability of the people to trust again in God. And when they trust in God, and when they renew their faith in God being in their midst, this gives them the ability to attack Amalek. But Amalek, of course, as we know, is the gematria, numerical value of the Hebrew word safek, which is a doubt. When they doubt if God is in their midst, so then Amalek, they're open to this possibility of Amalek attacking them. This whole parasha, by the way, which is very interesting, the number of verses you have in this whole parasha comes out to the acronym, to the gematria, the numerical value of the Hebrew word yad emunah. And in fact, in most of the texts, when they write how many verses there are in this parashat beshalach, they say it comes out to yad emunah, the hand of faith, like Moses' hands of faith. So the whole parasha really is about faith. It's about seeing God, recognizing God's miracles, but even when they're not obvious miracles. Yiru yesharim bismachu. It says in the Psalms, you have to look clearly and in a straight line in order to see and be happy. You have to know what you're looking at. So this idea of building up faith and building up trust in God. I want to end by somebody asked me a question this weekend. It says, well, sometimes people do things out of faith, but they do out of blind faith. So what's the difference between doing something out of faith and out of blind faith? Because we know sometimes things out of blind faith can go the wrong way. So my answer was, first of all, faith always goes together with logic in the sense that faith, it's true, it's a step above logic, but it's what we call a scholarly guess. In other words, you look at a situation, you see the situation has possibilities, and you take a possibility. There might be dangers, but you move forward too. So a lot of the belief is also belief in yourself and that God will help you. It's not to blindly do something without knowing if there's without taking the consequences into account. You are, but you also know that you have a good chance of doing it. And if you know if you're doing the right thing, that you should move forward. God said to Moses, move forward, so people should understand. If God said, there's a good reason why you should move forward, especially since the alternative, going backwards, is not even there. And I always end off by the story of David Ben-Gurion. In 1948, he gets a telephone call, or actually a message, from President Harry Truman of the US. And Truman says to relay the message to Ben-Gurion that 7 Arab nations are going to be attacking you, and I don't think it's a good idea for you to declare independence. So maybe don't do it. Give me some time. I'll try to negotiate something for the country. Ben-Gurion gets the message, and he turns to Yigal Allon, who was in charge of the intelligence for the Israeli Haggadah, which was the pre-runner of the Israel Defense Forces. He says, Yigal, what are our chances of winning a war against 7 Arab countries, 7 Arab armies? Alon says, David, not better than 50-50. Ben Gurion says, when in the last 2,000 years has the people of Israel had such good chances of taking back their indigenous land of Israel? And he declares on May 14th the independence of the state of Israel. And with God's help, we got through that war with a very fledgling and small army. Sometimes, okay, he knew that as Jews in 1948, our back was to the Shoah, to the Holocaust. So there was only moving forward. And history doesn't always smile at you all the time. You have to know when the opportunity is there. So what Ben Gurion does was a brave move. It was taking a chance, but sometimes you have to feel and have faith in the people, in the moment, that this is the right thing to do. So as I said, it's a bit of a belief in yourself, in the ability of the people, feeling the moment and the options, and seeing if the option is there and grabbing it at the time. Shalom, shalom.